Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the HELiX Focus session. Our session today will be Supply Chain Management, Sustainably Managing Humanitarian Packaging Waste by USAID. And we already have Greg Rulifson from the USAID. Hi, Greg. Morning. So before we start, I would like to remind everyone about the rules of this house. Let me share my screen first. Wait, I'll share my screen. Sorry. So I would like to kindly invite everyone to identify yourself, put your name and your organization. So when you have a question or comment, we can identify who are you, and maybe we can have a discussion with you. And also, we would like to remind everyone to be mindful. Please turn off your mic and video unless you are called. And if you have something to say, a comment or a question for us, just please let me know by raising your hand or put your question and comments in the chat box. We also would like to inform you that we have a feedback form for the attendance after this session. So I will put the link in the chat box, and we kindly invite you to fill the form. I think it's enough. Without further ado, I would like to invite Greg from the USAID. So the screen is yours.
Great, thank you, Sadhu. I appreciate it. And hi everyone. We are a fairly small group, so I think feel free to participate. Put your questions, comments in the chat as we go along, and we can have this be a bit more of a conversation. My name is Greg Rulifson. I am coming to you from Washington D.C. Getting close to midnight. So apologies if I stutter or seem a bit tired. I actually am a Science and Technology Policy Fellow and Sustainability Advisor within the Supply Chain Management Division of the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance in the U.S. Agency for International Development. I've been there about a year and a half, a little bit more. My background is actually in civil engineering and disaster risk management or mitigation. So actually some of the work that where I cut my teeth was in Indonesia, working on tsunami risk mitigation in Padang in West Sumatra. So it's kind of fun to be back. Wish I could actually be physically back in Indonesia or anywhere in Southeast Asia or the region more generally. But this will have to do for now, and maybe next year I can be there with you. So like I said, kind of keep it more of a conversation if we can, and a couple opportunities for you to join in. Feel free to send in your questions as you have them, and we can try to answer them on the fly rather than waiting until the end. I think it's a short enough presentation, and there are few enough of us that we can do that. So I will jump into it though, and share my screen with all of you and get us started. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about mostly packaging waste management. So this part of our sustainability, environmental sustainability in supply chain management. It's been what we've been working on for the past year and a half or so. And just really happy to be here once again. So, and thank you for being here as well. So I just want to get some chats going here. If you would be willing to share, is just, very broadly, how do typical humanitarian operations, whether they're rapid onset, long-term emergency, refugee settlements, whatever it may be, internally displaced people, how do they affect the environment? What are those environmental impacts? And if you would just write down some of these ideas in the chat box and just share those amongst all of us here. Oop. And Sadhu, if you can see the chats, maybe you can let me know what they say. I actually can't see them.
Or you may also want to ask people to speak. Greg?
Sure. Yeah. If anybody wants to come off mute and share some of the environmental impacts you've seen, please. All right, hearing none. Sadhu, are there any in the chat that you can see? Surprised I can't see it. Oh, there I can see it. To move this enough. Land clearing to set up the camps, absolutely, yeah. Good one, Mila, thank you. I don't know if there are any more. Certainly, we have lots of impacts that we typically see. So the water and wastewater associated with camps. You've got the packaging waste, the solid waste management, any kinds of plastics associated. The forests being cut down as well for firewood in some of those camps. And yeah, the Blackwater, there you go, Nate, thank you. Yeah, and so ideally, yeah, it would be integrated with city waste management if it exists, and then it might be kind of separate as well. Yeah, so maybe the chats are just coming through a little bit slowly. So anyway, please continue to put your ideas down. We're going to be talking specifically about packaging waste management, but at the end, would love to have a conversation more broadly about the environmental impacts of humanitarian assistance and what we can do to mitigate those issues. Yeah. So thanks everyone. There we go. So these are some photos that were taken, for a contest, actually a photo contest to USAID, and you can kind of see that many of these photos, the packaging is actually featured, and that's where our branding is for a lot of these. But that packaging does end up as waste in most humanitarian contexts. So solid waste management systems aren't set up ahead of time. Environmental impacts are excluded. We don't really have to worry about those during rapid onset or even some of the longer term ones under USAID policies at least. And oftentimes this is kind of the situation that we see is the waste getting into waterways or just staying on the land, and then maybe it's buried or burned. And pretty much everybody who's worked in humanitarian assistance recognizes that the way that we're doing things presently really isn't good enough. So our approach is in this joint initiative is that we're a partnership of humanitarian actors working together to make packaging and humanitarian assistance more environmentally and socially responsible. So this is called the Joint Initiative for Sustainable Humanitarian Assistance Packaging Waste Management. It's a very long name, and if anybody has good ideas for how to make it shorter, we would appreciate it. This actually builds on a previous joint initiative that was between USAID and the Joint Environment Unit within the UNEP and OCHA, so kind of this intersection of humanitarian assistance and the environmental program, where they were looking at coordinating assessments of environmental impacts of humanitarian assistance. And so this is specifically about packaging, but builds on those relationships and a lot of similar actors. So these are the different stakeholders that we have on board, the partners here. So you can see a combination of donors with FCDO or UKAID, ECHO, the European Union, the US, and then we also have some of the international organizations, World Food Program, UNHCR, IOM, ICRC, and then some of the larger NGOs as well. So CRS and Danish Refugee Council and Save the Children. And then importantly, we actually have a number of clusters involved. So the logistics cluster, the shelter cluster, and then more recently WASH cluster and the camp coordination and camp management clusters. So really trying to get everybody on board and then divide and conquer this challenge of packaging waste management. So this is the aim and the approach that we're taking here. Just a couple bullets for y'all to read, and that I'll read through a little bit here. Really trying to minimize the impact, so reduce the amount of packaging if we can, but the packaging that does go there that maybe would turn into waste, how do we turn that into opportunities for those that we assist? So really thinking about circular economy, all the opportunities across the supply chain. We'll talk more about those in particular in a moment here. But there are many opportunities, and so we want to be looking at all of them in the different ways that they show up. But one of the things that importantly is improving the coordination. This came through again and again in the scoping study that we did back in 2019 that was saying that we need to coordinate the way that we deal with packaging waste And so that's the USAID role right now, is coordinating, but we're all kind of co-leading this joint initiative. And then again, kind of changing this narrative. So, okay, not necessarily waste, but it's only waste if we think of it as such. And so really we want it to be thinking more of like opportunities, value, this material is valuable. We know that it gets reused in lots of different ways. Overall, we just need to be better environmental stewards, kind of this idea of doing no harm, while looking at both the top down, so what are the policy kind of approaches, and those we can take as donors, but also bottom up. So lots of good ideas are out there, things are happening right now. We just need to be aware of them. And that comes to this final point of really raising awareness. How do we make sure that this issue doesn't go away? In the sense of like in people's consciousness, and that in that way that we can make an impact. It really hasn't been on the top of anybody's agenda. We're trying to raise it and to make sure that people are aware that, yeah, we're giving out lots and millions of tons and billions of dollars worth of humanitarian assistance, but that it's having a lasting impact in a positive, but also in a slightly negative way. And so just to be overly clear on this, that we're really charting this path collaboratively. And I'll go through some examples of that in a moment, but that everything that we're doing is really led by the members here. This is me presenting. I'm part of USAID right now, but it's a joint initiative and trying to represent all of us here. So just to give you all a little bit of background of how this came to be and where we've gone so far. I don't think we presented in this forum before, so this is probably new to most of you. 2019, middle in 2019, we started this, and it was co-conceived with USAID and the World Food Program and the Global Logistics Cluster. We did this scoping study from mid 2019, and then published the study in 2020. You know all about what happened in early 2020 and COVID pandemic, and then we had of course, we also had a merger between the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance and Food for Peace. So that really kind of shook up USAID's organization and our structure. But we got everybody together for a collaborative road mapping, this joint planning process that happened in November of last year. And then we put in all of these ideas that we had of where we want to go, what we want to be working on, getting agreements on those, and then turning that into a log frame and activity plan. We'll share some of those soon. Got together, nailed down exactly what we're going to do, get everybody on board, say, yep, let's do it. We got some more funding to continue on with the coordination, as well as get some of those activities kicked off. So really happening in real time. We're starting to see some of the first activities kicking off now, and I'll get into those here in a moment. So certainly don't intend for y'all to read this, but these are the activities, and the green ones are the ones we're pushing sooner. The yellow are coming up in about a year or two, and then the red ones are more in the 3 to 4 year. We'll be starting those out in that timeline, and they all kind of build on each other. But you can kind of see on the left side in outcome one, where we have these would be applicable across any kind of environmental sustainability topic, or any topic generally. I think that we want to have evidence-based coordination and advocacy. Communication strategy has been really important, and something we're excited to be getting up and running, and then really doing more of that stakeholder engagement and monitoring, continuing to go back and forth, coming out to events like these, trying to grow our initiative and see who else would want to be involved. And then on the right side, you can see more of the packaging, and we'll get into those specifics here in a moment. So what are we working on? Here's some details here with a little bit of some graphics to go along with it. So policy and advocacy, these are some of the long term, the hard work, maybe some of the thankless work, the ones that's a little less tangible, but really looking at that policy landscape, studying it, and finding out, okay, where is it that we align? Where do we need to make improvements? How can we standardize? And the Joint Environment Unit and USAID, we're going to be looking at that pretty closely, along with some of our other donor partners. One thing that came through loud and clear is that if we want to make progress on environmental sustainability, especially in humanitarian assistance, that we're going to need some data and some evidence to make sure that everybody who's making those decisions can look back to, hey, this is why we're making this decision. So we're really trying to set a baseline, find out what kind of an impact are we having, what are the items that are having the most impact, and really getting to what kinds of environmental impacts, both energy, greenhouse gases, And then, of course, just the plastics and other kinds of material waste as well. So procurement is one that we've been kicking off recently, has really been, I think, where we find that we have a lot more control and can understand it a little bit easier, looking to standardize procurement specifications, get guidance notes out to those officials who are doing the procurement, whether they're requisitioners or the actual officers themselves who have that official role. Really trying to just do more of that awareness raising, because we so far people get it. It's not a complicated kind of thing that we need to put this language into our procurement, but how to get there, how to work with suppliers so that they can make the best decisions possible. With some of our academic partners, and then various organizations have their own little research and other academic partners for them as well, looking more at design, production, distribution. So how do we improve the packaging? How do we improve the commodities? How can we look at tertiary and secondary packaging that may be unnecessary, that stretch wrapping around and around and around for palletizing really protects something like vegetable oil that we're sending across the world, but also there really isn't a way to reuse that plastic, and that can be pretty damaging. So what are some of those compromises that we can make so that we can all mutually benefit? And then finally, importantly, that I think like one of the points that somebody made in the comments earlier, end of life solid waste management, really looking at strength, understanding what the systems are presently, both informal and formal, but then what are some better ways that we can use these materials going forward. So we have especially with the World Food Program and other partners, looking at how to improve that. And I'll talk in detail about a couple more of those, because we've kicked those off over the last few months as well. So that's kind of everything that we're working on. If you wanted to see it in one snapshot here that I think is fairly digestible, these are the ways that we're approaching it. And it doesn't sound all encompassing, but I think it's pretty close, getting to as many opportunities as possible to make a change. So I won't go through all these words here, I promise, but just to show you a little bit of how we're approaching this in those various areas that I just laid out, that we have multiple activities underneath each one. And you can read through some of these here, but sustainable packaging requirements. So can we have those written into some of our procurement guidelines and otherwise, and funding applications that say, hey, this is the kind of thing that you're going to need to do, look for these options when applying, and this is eventually what we're going to require if you want to get an ECHO or UKAID or USAID award, and that's kind of way down the road perhaps, but really trying to see how, again, we can work with partners and suppliers to get some better options. Under the data and evidence, you can see there's a good number of details here, but really one of the examples that I think lately that we're looking at are these life cycle assessments. That's the LCAs, they're under 2.1.2, and looking at, okay, so the ready-to-use foods, the polypropylene bags, the polywoven large 50 kilogram sacks, maybe some of the cardboard cartons and steel cans, at least for the food that comes from the US, and then other items as well. What is the life cycle assessment of those? What energy embodied, and then once it gets out into the environment, what are those impacts? So we can be looking at a number of those items that we send, and then also just seeing 2.1.1 is pretty straightforward, but it's huge. It's what are we doing collectively? We can measure pretty well so far the amount of that we do in Title II, which is the U.S. in-kind, the stuff that's coming from the U.S. But other than that, we don't have a good idea of what's happening in the entire sector. Each organization maybe has it, but overall, we don't know what the impact is. So for example, in the 2020, USAID procured 19 million polypropylene bags. Almost all of those went out into the field somewhere without much guidance on what to do with them next. But that certainly doesn't cover all of the polypropylene bags. WFP procures them from elsewhere. ECHO has their own funded. They're not buying stuff from the US to ship, and so on. So then within procurement, like the couple of those that I mentioned and the couple that we just actually got going in the last 2 weeks or so are those second two: packaging sustainability criteria list, as well as a guidance note on best packaging practices. And it's really just, our procurement officers know who the suppliers are. We just need to get them the right information and maybe phase in some better sustainability criteria and work towards that and be more diligent about that. So I'm hoping that this is ringing a bell for some of y'all here in the logistics field, and I know this is the kind of thing that my colleagues in the supply chain management division, they're like, yeah, this could actually, if we can get something specific and something that is reasonable, we could start making some changes here. So then end-of-life waste management, I'll talk about a couple of these in more detail, but one that I want to highlight is this packaging management assessment tool, and something that may be available to many of you. If you're not already aware of it, NEAT Plus, the Nexus Environmental Assessment Tool. You can find it on the eecenter.org, and I can drop that link in a little bit. But it's just a way to evaluate, okay, what kind of an impact has there been, and what could there be due to this emergency response? And we're trying to add a module on there that'll allow humanitarians to find out what kind of packaging and other kind of solid waste impact there's going to be, plan for it, connect it with those systems, or plan for something else. So this is largely for our partners, but I think it's helpful to demonstrate here as well that we started this, mid 2019. USAID hired me and then funded our contractors. That's ECOS down there, and continues to fund ECOS, and it at an increasing level. And then the Lincoln Lab, and I'll talk about them, as well as getting some other funding going. And so all in all, we've been really pushing this forward, getting more of the supply chain management division's staff. There are 5 of us working. I'm the only one working on it full time, but on environmental performance issues. And then we're also bringing in some of our colleagues from within BHA, within the office, the field and response operations office where I work, but also across the rest of the Bureau. And yeah, so just wanted to share that there's a good 7, 12, 17, somewhere in the 20 range of people working on this, just USAID affiliated. And then we have all of our partners as well. So it's a large group, and I think that, and we're hoping to build from that, of course, beyond packaging eventually, but really start to make some changes. And then across USAID, just want to show this. These are the various, in blue, various parts of the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance we've gotten on board with this, and that we continue to inform and bring along. So those who are in the geographic offices, who are in the budget and management offices, policy, our technical and program staff, but then also in other parts of USAID, so global health with the healthcare waste management work that they do, and then DDI, development, democracy and innovation. There's an ocean plastics team, which I imagine many here are familiar with, since a lot of their work has been in Southeast Asia, but also innovation more broadly, and how can we get some funding, some ingenuity, some excitement around reducing the plastics and packaging waste issue. So to get into some more details, like I mentioned, 19 million, these are the contributions. This is all Title II in-kind coming from the US. We're buying it from US farmers and shipping it out to places like Yemen and Ethiopia, Somalia, and so forth. So you can see the numbers here are pretty large, and then there's large weights associated. So, and these are all shipped to places with, in most cases, they do not have very robust solid waste management programs. So, or systems, either supported by a city, maybe informal, whatever it is, it doesn't serve the people very well. And we don't have policies that are, that our partners can lean on to get funding to deal with this kind of thing as well. So a couple approaches. Oh, and here are some of the non-food items as well. So you can see various water containers that'd be of a pretty thick plastic, bladders as well. And then the rolls of plastic sheeting, which we know are really valuable, but also really damaging and eventually do break down. So some of our partners have done a good job, like with kitchen sets, removing all the individual plastic packaging. Same thing with hygiene kits to make it more modular. But at the same time, we know that there's still way too much packaging and way too much waste associated with our humanitarian assistance. So one approach that the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Lincoln Laboratory has been working on is a solar-powered recycling unit, or at least clean energy recycling unit. Right now, they're looking more at a baler. So it's just a way that, okay, if we can capture as much of that packaging waste as possible, how can we compact it and then get it into a density that will make it economical to put back onto a truck to do those reverse logistics to get it to some kind of a solid waste management facility, whether it's in South Sudan or in Kenya or anywhere else, either in a rapid onset or a longer term emergency. Right now, we're in the prototyping phase, trying to figure out a good place to pilot. Maybe it's going to be Madagascar, maybe Kenya. But really, this is a high-powered research institution, and that's taking its know-how and its engineers and its scientists and looking at this issue for us, and all of those complexities that many of you or all of you know quite well. That it's no easy feat to do something, even if it's easy technology. So getting into that systems approach, what are all the potential pitfalls and challenges that we could see out there in the field. So we're pretty excited about this. It's the first of this kind of attempt, and we hope to keep them engaged for some time. The other one that we're working on is this private sector landscape assessment. Just started in the past few weeks. Another different group of contractors interviewing our partners, and then eventually the private sector industry where we have nearby humanitarian operations, really trying to connect that packaging waste. So if we can collect it, compact it, then where is it going to go? Particularly looking at East Africa, but not really limited to there. Just really trying to see, like, what are the creative things that are happening? What kind of industries are being started? Who are the entrepreneurs? How is solid waste being turned into livelihoods, and how can we support that? How can we facilitate that? Because we know it's happened successfully in many other parts of the world, and we feel like for the recipients of humanitarian assistance that it can be the most valuable to them in a number of ways. So another area that we're looking at and that we're pretty excited about. So we're coming up on the end here of the prepared remarks, and just to say that, okay, so packaging waste management, that's great. That's under the previous administration, we couldn't really talk too much about climate change mitigation or adaptation so much, to some extent. Other kinds of climate change impacts, environmental impacts weren't going to be well received. So we focused on packaging waste that could kind of get through, and it was supported. But now it's a new administration and new priorities. We know that humanitarian assistance is going to be prioritized, but also environmental sustainability. And so we're something that a colleague, Pablo Torres, took as trying to think about our entire supply chain and everywhere that we work, all the impacts, and that waste management, logistics and transportation, where kind of the Fleet Forum, if you're familiar with that, they have a clean fleet toolkit that has supported a number of organizations in improving their logistics, greening their logistics. The commodities themselves, especially the agricultural commodities, we know, but all of the non-food items have a large impact on the environment as well. So what's the embodied energy there? What are those ways that we can improve, have more sustainable procurement for the commodities? And then the footprint. So what it takes to do the work. So flights for meetings, if this were to be in person, for example, our offices, both in the field and in Washington for USAID in that case, and otherwise. So this is kind of the next steps where we're going. We're making little bits and pieces of progress on this. And so if you have any good ideas for these parts of environmental sustainability improvements, we'd love to hear about those as well. So that is it for what I have prepared. Could have shared a lot more in a year and a half of work, but figure that's enough for now. Yeah, and I think just question and answer. I'm happy to open it up here.
It's great. Before we start to have a question and answer, we can ask a participant here to maybe have some comments or about your presentation in here. How do you think?
I'm not sure if that was a question for me. Sadi, it broke up a little bit. I didn't quite hear it all.
Oh yeah. How if we ask participant here to maybe have some comments, you can, like, for instance, our colleague from WFP, can we allow him to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think we have a good amount of time, right? And which I think is what you're getting at. And so, yeah, please, if anybody wants to just share their own experiences and how they've been dealing with packaging waste, or if there's or other kinds of environmental performance, would love to hear from you. Please, yeah, Nate, if you want to just jump on in here.
I think we can start from Nate.
Yeah, hey, that was a great presentation. Can you hear me over?
Yes, we can hear you.
Greg, that was an excellent presentation. And coming out of DC, I know, it's 12:10 or so. That amazing work that you're doing. So I'm the civil military coordinator for World Food Program based out of Bangkok, Thailand. So when an event generally takes place, I'm on the receiving end of all those supplies from USAID, and we work very closely with BHA. I've got the laundry list of names, but I'm usually one at the airport on the airhead, right? And so where a lot of that waste is not moved, and it causes literally global backups of airframes coming in, to hear the recommendations that you said and the progress that you're making is very, very productive. And I think, as this process proceeds, it'll, for my bit of it, it clears up the airhead. When the airhead's clear, then we can move a lot more supplies for, those most affected people. But again, I thought the presentation was great. I'm a big fan of USAID and BHA because you help us do a lot of great things. Over.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, Nate. Yeah, and appreciate your work out there too. Making it all happen for us. I mean, yeah, and certainly WFP has been one of our strongest, and especially your colleagues out of Nairobi, and then Georgina Stickles out of Rome as well. She's been a long time partner. So yeah, just happy to have the support, and any other further input that you have as it comes along. That one more slide that I can put in my information here. But yeah, we'll just love to get as much of that feedback for what you're experiencing as possible. Yeah. And yeah, if we have another hand, we can definitely take another.
Yeah, I think I see Miss Aquino raise her hand. You may.
Hello, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, all right. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Greg. My name is Aquino. I'm actually a researcher from an organization in Indonesia on resilience studies. I think the presentation is really helpful for me to get an insight of on what humanitarian actors have done in terms of trying to be more sustainable. My background is actually in solid waste management in more general settings, not emergency, but and so I'm pretty new to this this topic, humanitarian waste management. And we at the research at the Resilience Development Initiative, which is my organization now, we are looking to develop a research on humanitarian waste management in terms of its connection to city waste management. So as part of city preparedness to emergency is also preparing themselves in terms of managing waste that's coming with the emergency situation that happens. Either it's from the emergency itself, or from the response to that to that emergency. So I think there aren't many research on this yet in Indonesia. At least I know Japan is doing a lot more research. And so I have two questions, and perhaps this is outside of your presentation or your areas of work, but maybe you can give me some ideas in terms of connection with city waste management in general. Is there anything that you can share as an example? And then the second one is that do you have any suggestions or pointers in terms of research on humanitarian waste management outside of what the humanitarian actors have been doing, perhaps in Indonesian context or in relation to the government, the waste management system in a country or in a city? What do you think would be helpful to do more research on? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your work and the research. I mean, this seems quite well aligned. So yeah, we'll certainly be able to take advantage of it and hopefully contribute a little bit. So feel free to reach out. I think at any point in your research process. But yeah, so on the first one, I don't have too many good examples. The one I can give you actually is that we've heard from recent consultations with partners is actually what sorry, there's a cat here, if that's what you're hearing in the background. He's confused about why I'm awake at this time. The solid waste management, like connecting to those systems in Nairobi and connecting that back with the camps in Kenya. So WFP has tried to do that. They've had varying degrees of success. I think they've done a decent amount in Sudan and in Ethiopia as well. And yeah, similar kinds of things that they've been able to connect it to some extent, but it's kind of hit or miss. And I think it really is like, if you're in Indonesia and most of the, if you're anywhere kind of proximate to a city and the size of the cities, you'll have pretty good luck with getting it there. I think it's just kind of the distance and how hard the roads are to actually transport it. So I think there are some examples. We are trying to find as many of those as we can, just like you are. So hopefully we'll have more to share within about 6 months here, once that private sector landscape assessment is completed. So yeah, we'll be sharing that far and wide if we can. So to your first question. To the second question, so let me just give you 2 things, because I could give you a dozen, and I don't want to overwhelm you, and I'm sure you have a long list yourself. The first is the informal economy. And I know that's broad, but I think that we are really hoping to find out to some extent through our private sector landscape assessment, but I think that we need as many of these as possible. So currently, whether in a rapid onset disaster, you have an earthquake in Indonesia, how does the informal waste picking, kind of formally, or the materials trading sector get activated and come into support the solid waste management and getting people kind of back to normal in that kind of a response. I think that part where the government doesn't have much control over it, I think we're really interested to see how that fits, because those are the communities that we really don't want to affect negatively by setting up something official that would take away from their current livelihood. And so I think we need as much of that information as possible. And at present, it's pretty limited, but we know it's important. The other one is, I think, which materials are most valuable or already recycled. So that's one of the approaches we're taking, is really because, and actually this comes out of where you might actually have a similar situation, maybe, depending on where you're looking in Indonesia, but in the Caribbean, where we've been recently trying to understand the solid waste management systems, certain islands will take certain materials. So Barbados will handle a certain kind of plastic, and then St. Vincent will have some kind of metal, and then Jamaica will have something else. So and that was pretty interesting to hear that any individual nation isn't necessarily going to handle all of the solid waste, the different types, because there's so many types of plastic and types of metals and so on, and that they actually share and have a system between the islands. And I think that we're seeing right now, after the St. Vincent volcano erupting, we'll see during hurricane season, we're going to have like our eyes peeled for how that system gets activated to deal with some of the solid waste that's created by the event itself. So those are a couple ideas I have, and yeah, excited to hear what comes out of your research. So over from me. Yeah, and I think there's Aquino had put in yeah, if others have more examples, please share in the chat, or feel free to come off mute and share examples that you have of how the solid waste management systems are actually used effectively or not so effectively, or whatever that might be following a disaster.
Yes, thank you, Greg. If the others have any thoughts or question, you can put in the Zoom chat, or you can raise your hand. So if it's not, yeah, I think it's also okay to maybe, Greg, you can share your contact, maybe your email or LinkedIn. So if a participant here want to like asking you a further question, and do that.
And also, I might just add while I can, I think you're seeing this right now, we have a little survey that would be really helpful if any of you are interested in learning more, that we can get your information and what you're interested in through that Google form. So yeah, please, if you wouldn't mind filling that out for us for the joint initiative, if you're interested in continuing to learn more about this and maybe come along with us in this joint initiative, that would be very helpful. And we're also looking for pictures and videos and other things like that, if you have them, to continue to raise that awareness. But then, yeah, here are some emails, email addresses that you can feel free to reach out. So a number of them here, but mine is down and grulifson@usaid.gov, but you can also email our listserv that we created for the supply chain management division sustainability efforts, bha.scm.sustainability@usaid.gov. Yeah, and then we also have a newsletter, and I will drop the link to that newsletter in just a moment. But wanted to give you a moment to pick that up, and now I will stop. And we have a raised hand. You may go ahead, Mila, if you like.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mila Lamarda. I work for the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Everyone's hearing me fine? Yeah, so I'm based in Bangkok, Thailand, because we have a regional hub here that covers the ASEAN region and the Pacific. And in particular, I'm working with the humanitarian aid arm of the SDC. And I will surely share the slides and also all the other information, the contact persons, to my colleagues back in Bern working in logistics. And if they don't know about this initiative yet, definitely I'm pretty sure they'll be very excited to know more about the sustainable packaging initiative. What I'm actually interested in is your perspective coming from also a humanitarian agency, USAID, on how you were able to integrate or to convince your colleagues within USAID to take up on sustainable packaging, and whether you hit some roadblocks along the way. Did it require considerable mindset change, and if so, how did you do it? It's like I'm pretty sure everyone agrees on being sustainable and being green, but if you try to implement it concretely, you start to realize there are actual challenges to it. So what do you think what would be your advice on how to get how you were able to get your colleagues on board with this initiative? Thank you.
Thanks, Mila. I mean, it's a tough question, and thank you also for passing it along. We have a couple colleagues in SDC, but I think there are many more, and the ones that we have are more in policy. So I think to your logistics colleagues would be really helpful. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, you're right. That presentation that I just gave it's not quite convincing enough to just say, hey, let's get all of our policies aligned, all of them going. That's it. Yeah, so it's a long process. I mean, I was a new face. I tried not to be a jerk, I really tried to be as nice as possible and welcome everybody in. Those kinds of things matter, actually. And that, I have a PhD, and so I could wave that around and say, listen to me, and then nobody would, or they would wait until I left and then not listen to me. So I'll give you a couple examples, but overall, like, everybody gets it. They just don't know how to prioritize it. And so we are really trying to find those ways that it is mutually beneficial, that it's not more burdensome on any of our colleagues or on our suppliers or on our partners. It's not going to cost them anymore. We try to make those things really clear up front, because unfortunately the thinking has been, okay, if we're going to reduce the environmental impacts, that means that we have to pay for that. That means that less money goes to humanitarian assistance to save lives, and that doesn't have to be the case. I think that's what we're trying to prove. And so, but it's a long effort, and we need that evidence. And so I don't think I've convinced nearly enough people who weren't already on board that that this is the way to go, and or that it's really going to be mutually beneficial. And I do think that we will have some good examples, but it's going to take a couple years to show how we can support livelihoods by capturing that packaging waste. I was talking with Bruno over at the Global Logistics Cluster this morning, and he thinks that one of the best things we could do is get in the carbon credit game. So any of the airlines or shipping companies or whatever it is, that if they need to offset their emissions, then that could actually it could go to funding some kind of environmental performance, environmental sustainability, and humanitarian assistance, which I thought is very clever. And this is what we were talking more about, private sector engagement. And I think that's being more creative, finding out where the money is so that we can bring it into what we're doing. And that they really want to support this work. Like, we're doing two things that people generally like, humanitarian assistance and environmental sustainability. Like, if that intersection does not kind of get you activated in some way, or at least be supportive, I think you might want to find another line of business. So we are trying to find as many of those, because people want to be on board. We know that, and that's been really encouraging. They just want to make sure that it's not taking away from some of the assistance that they're giving at this time. But my job has been twofold since I've come in, and one was to do this packaging waste thing, and get this joint initiative going, built, get more people on board in outside the agency. But then the other one is this cultural change, and that it's a long effort. And I think this is kind of what you're getting at a bit, Mila. And it's, we had a team of 1 when I started, and now we have a team of 5 in just a year and a half, of people that are committed to this, that are working on it, that are bringing it into their day-to-day, that are really, moving it up little by little in the amount of time that they can spend on it for their work. And so the nature of having people working on this and then reporting out to their higher ups that they're doing it and being supported in that way gets us that support, and I think kind of snowballs it out. And so those are a couple of the approaches that we've been taking. There are more that we can do. I think right now our policy and actually the communications people are really excited about the environmental performance stuff. Like, it's a happy story that they want to tell. They want to tweet about it. And so we're really trying to leverage that as well, because we know that there's a big community that want to support this and want to tell that good story, in addition to, like, hey, we're giving out this much food, and we're giving out this much water bladders and all that. Like, that's still really important, but I think they want to see some of that innovation. They want to see us getting better, see the humanitarians trying to improve their own processes. And I think there's a large contingency at least within BHA who want to see that and who want to be part of that. So those are a couple different approaches that we're taking. And yeah, that's just been my experience so far, though. Yeah, hopefully that's, yeah. Bila, do you want to comment back on that? Yeah, Mila, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for that that really helpful response. I noted them down as much as I could. Thank you. And first of all, before I say something about what you just said, I would like also to thank you for the presentation, of course, and which was very interesting. And if there's a possibility to have the slides somewhere on the HELiX, that would be very helpful. Because I took some screenshots of the slides, but perhaps the whole thing would be also very helpful and useful for my colleagues. So going back to your response, I think, yes, the way to go is to make sure that it's mutually beneficial and doesn't add more burden to our colleagues, because I'm also in charge of mainstreaming DRR and climate change adaptation into development projects. So I understand, trying to convince people to integrate a certain theme into their projects, which is not usually, the normal course of things. Just trying to engage people in integrating disaster risk reduction and climate change considerations into their projects does take time, and it requires a lot of patience and a lot of communication. So I guess it's just the way to doing things when it comes to introducing innovation. And in terms of the carbon credit approach that you mentioned, I think that's also a very good idea of doing things. I believe the Swiss federal government has this initiative called Roomba, whereby they compensate the how do you call it, like flights taken by members of the federal ministry, and then kind of how do you call that? Yeah, they compensate. I'm not an expert on this clearly, but in the sense that I think the government compensates the emissions during flights taken by the members of the ministry, and I think that's a way of returning back to society. And the communications thing, that is also very important, because as you know, we do like the success stories, and it's a good way to also leverage that. And I will use these your advice on this, your experience to push the sustainable packaging initiative to my colleagues. I have a follow-up question though. This morning, the lady from DHL mentioned about sustainable packaging, and I wonder whether USAID has been supporting like private companies that work on sustainable packaging, like seaweed or recycled paper in their for packaging, because I know that there are a lot of startups that kind of find ways to make packaging more sustainable, and I'm wondering whether USAID has been supporting these startups. Thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, it's a good question. That's kind of where I started on this. When I began, I didn't have so much to do in the coordination. Was looking more at technologies and what kinds of different packaging, getting the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, talking with them and seeing what kinds of improvements they're making. So we kind of moved away from that, really focusing more on the coordination, the packet, like the waste management, and then getting some of the procurement efforts, and really like getting our suppliers to go seek that out. So I'm almost positive that USAID is not funding any kind of actual like packaging technology improvements. But I do think, but at the same time, the door is open we're kind of listening and seeing where those might come. And yeah, the idea right now is really like, oh, we don't have our, you know, hands on the levers of anything that's like, you know, go, you know, research this thing or research this packaging. It needs to be more directly related to development if we're going to fund some kind of research. But at the same time, we can encourage our suppliers to go find them. We have partnerships with like Michigan State University here in the US that has a packaging engineering program. And so we think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I would love to, like having an engineering background, I would love to go explore those a little bit more. And it seems like I need to learn more about some seaweed packaging and other things like that. Yeah, because that's definitely part of our those different areas that we're working across the supply chain and the circular economy approach. But I think that like the expertise that we have in the joint initiative currently doesn't fit within the new packaging technology kind of realm. And we would like to have it, and it's just not what we have right now. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea and definitely needs to be part of the solution. So yeah, and I'm sorry I missed that presentation earlier. I certainly have to go find it. And if there was part of the opening with Carmen from ICRC, she's one of the more active members of this joint initiative. But I know you mentioned DHL, so I'll have to hunt that down. But thanks for that recommendation. I fully agree with you. And yeah, what we have more.
I think we have a wait, Deepak.
Yeah, Deepak, I don't know if you wanted to come off mute and say a little bit more about your question here. I think I can read it if you like, but yeah, if you wanted to say something more, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Greg, thank you for the presentation. Actually, I was wondering about that, how in the event of disaster relief, when the priority would be like to provide the relief assistance. So as per my understanding about the literature that, sorry, I should have introduced myself. I am a researcher in operations management. So I am trying to work in humanitarian logistics space. So my doubt is actually that when the aid comes from different organizations and different individuals, so how we can specify that what type of packaging materials can be used? How do you tackle that issue?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, the approach that we're taking is really what I laid out, and you know, that across the entire supply chain, and that we are at some point going to be making recommendations to our suppliers for having packaging that'll be either, you know, biodegradable if it doesn't need as much of a shelf life, or if the technology has come further, or just some kind of intention for how it can be reused. So that if they design the packaging or use a material that could be more easily reused by the beneficiaries, then I think that would improve it. Yeah, but in general, I mean, I think the water sanitation and hygiene folks have some responsibility when they come in on a response, that some solid waste is part of it as well, because that's certainly a health concern. And that water can pool there and then be, you know, a way that disease can spread. But overall, it really isn't an issue that's well attended to, as far as I know. But I also haven't been on a response. That was, you know, one of the intentions before COVID happened. I've mostly worked in development in different countries. So yeah, I think that so yeah, overall, that's part of the reason we're working on this, is that there isn't too much room, or there hasn't been much room in all the things that a humanitarian responder has to do, and that they really haven't needed to deal with the solid waste in that case. And so we're trying to provide some more options, some better ways to do it. So if it's the recycling technology, that would be available. But then also to perhaps connect it with a city-wide or a regional system that can get those materials back into some kind of productive reuse. But somebody else on the line who's been part of a response that wants to talk a little bit more about how packaging or generally solid waste is managed in this kind of a situation, would be happy to have you come share that experience.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I would also like to remind everyone that we have a form for the attendance feedback. We are kindly engage you to fill the form also. And I think we still have time. If there is any question or comments, we end this session. If not, I think, Greg, do you have any closing statement for this session?
Sure, just very briefly. Thank you, Sadhu, and thank you everybody for your attention and participation here. I think it's a a concurrent session when this is one of those that doesn't seem quite as core maybe to the humanitarian logistics. So just appreciate you being here. I mean, it's something that wasn't something I was really aware of before getting into it, recognizing that we have a really good group of people working on this though, and that the numbers are increasing, the awareness is increasing, and I think that the questions you're asking are just kind of like spot on. Like these are the questions that we're trying to ask and that we're trying to answer, and that we have the whole world to cover in a lot of ways, and that we recognize that the context for any any way to deal with this, whether it's the local procurement to get some kind of packaging that's going to be made of seaweed or something else that's locally sorry, the cat just tried to jump on the counter and miscalculated. A way for us to locally procure some kind of packaging that's going to be less environmentally damaging, that can protect that important humanitarian commodity and then get it back to get it there for a response. That's something that we would want to support. But then of course, whatever kind of solid waste management system that is there, or what the impacts are if the solid waste is not managed. And then we recognize that the Southeast Asia has one of the bigger plastics waste problems in the world, and for the world, than other regions as well. And so really the more stories and examples of success and challenges and all of that we can get in these questions that you all are sharing, I think the better. So I hope that fill out the form, stay in touch. Please just feel free to cold email me. Welcome that anytime, and have a conversation and see how we can continue to address this challenge together. But that's all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Before we end this session, I would like to invite everyone to open your video. I think we can have a group ending this session. I already allow you all to open your video. Hi, Mila. Yeah, I think I will wait for the next 30 seconds before we take a photo. Miss Haura, Christopher, and our colleague from IFRC. Hi. And also we have Yuda, Susan, and Amy. Yeah, okay. I think the other people is still shy, but I will still wait 10 seconds if you still need to have a touch before we end the session. Okay, everyone, let's have a group photo with a big smile. We have, I will count 3, 2, 1 with a big smile, everyone. Yes, thank you very much, everyone. And please stay tuned on the HELiX, because after this session, we still have the iPitch, and it will be very, very interesting and exciting. And very much, Greg, for your time and interactive discussion. Thank you very much. And see you soon, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.